Punch her teeth out. Lieutenant Commander Derek Bowen's voice shattered the morning stillness at Naval Special Warfare Command, his finger jabbing toward the woman standing in the training circle. Commander Sarah McKenna, 52 years old, didn't flinch as 300 eyes turned toward her. The trainee Bowen had ordered 6'4", 240 pounds of fresh-from-Bud-S muscle shifted uncomfortably. Sarah's hands hung loose at her sides. Her gray-streaked hair caught the California sun. She'd survived 28 years as a SEAL. She'd killed more enemies than most of these men had ever seen. And now this desk jockey wanted to watch her get beaten for entertainment. Before we continue, if you're enjoying this story, please hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss our content. And drop a comment telling us what city you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Now let's get back to Sarah's story. The morning had started wrong from the moment Sarah walked onto the training compound. She'd felt it in the way conversations stopped when she passed in the sideways glances from younger operators and the whispered words that weren't quite whispered enough. That's her. McKenna. Can't believe she's still active. 52. My dad's 52. He can barely run a mile. Heard she's only here because of some diversity quota bullshit. Sarah kept her face neutral. She'd heard worse. Hell, she'd survived worse. 3 decades in a profession that barely acknowledged women existed had given her skin thicker than Kevlar. But Lieutenant Commander Derek Bowen, he was something new. She'd first encountered him 2 weeks ago when he'd arrived at the command with his spotless service record and his chest full of ribbons earned behind desks in Washington. 38 years old, movie star handsome with the kind of confidence that came from never having been truly tested. He'd made his opinion of her clear within the first 5 minutes. Commander McKenna, he'd said, not bothering to hide the once-over his eyes gave her. I've read your jacket. Impressive. For its time. But the SEAL teams have evolved considerably since the 90s. We're focused on youth speed explosive power. Modern warfare doesn't have much use for, how should I put this, delicately experienced operators. Sarah had smiled politely. I appreciate your perspective, sir. What she hadn't said, I was running operations in Somalia when you were in middle school. I was in Afghanistan when you were pledging a fraternity. I've got more combat hours than you have total time in uniform. Now standing in the center of the training circle with Bowen circling her like a shark that smelled blood, Sarah understood exactly what was happening. This wasn't training. This was a message. This was Bowen establishing dominance, showing everyone in the command that the old guard, her generation, her methods, her very existence was obsolete. The trainee Bowen had called forward looked miserable. His name was Seaman Jacob Torres. 22, barely 3 months out of basic underwater demolition SEAL training. Sarah had watched him during the morning drills. Good instincts, solid technique. The kind of kid who might actually make it if the system didn't chew him up first. Seaman Torres, Bowen said, his voice carrying across the compound. You see Commander McKenna here? She's what we used to accept in the teams. Before we had standards. Before we understood what real warriors look like. Torres shifted his weight. Sir, I don't think... Did I ask you to think? Bowen's voice cracked like a whip. I gave you an order. Engage the commander in hand-to-hand combat, full contact. Show her what a modern operator is capable of. Sarah caught Torres's eye. She gave him the smallest nod. It's okay, kid. Do what you have to do. Torres moved forward, telegraphing his intentions so clearly that Sarah could have defended against him in her sleep. A standard right hook textbook, Bud's training the kind of punch instructors taught because it was safe and controlled. Sarah slipped it with minimal movement, redirecting his momentum with a subtle shift of her weight. Torres stumbled past her, caught himself, turned back with an apologetic expression. The crowd murmured, a few chuckles. Bowen's face darkened. Again. And this time, Torres, pretend like you actually want to hit her. Pretend like she's the enemy. Because let me tell you something, in real combat, the enemy doesn't care about your feelings. They don't care about being polite. They will destroy you without hesitation. Torres came again, this time with more commitment. Sarah parried, ducked, moved inside his guard, and could have executed any number of finishing techniques. Instead, she simply placed her palm against his chest and pushed gently, resetting the distance between them. More laughter from the crowd. This time, Sarah heard the edge in it. They weren't laughing with her. They were laughing at the absurdity of the situation, this gray-haired woman making a young SEAL look foolish. "Stop!" Bowen's voice echoed off the surrounding buildings. He strode into the circle, his face flushed with anger. "What the hell was that? Torres, are you afraid of her? Is that it? You're scared of a woman old enough to be your mother?" "No, sir. You just nothing," Bowen was shouting now, playing to the crowd. "This is exactly what's wrong with the modern military. We've gone soft. We're so worried about hurting someone's feelings, so concerned with inclusivity and sensitivity, that we've forgotten what our actual job is. Our job is violence. Controlled professional violence. And Commander McKenna here," he gestured at her with contempt, "she represents everything that's holding us back." Sarah felt something cold settle in her chest. She'd been through this before. Different faces, different decades, same fundamental message. You don't belong here. Bowen turned to face her directly. "You know what I think, Commander? I think you've had a good run, an impressive career. But there comes a time when every warrior needs to recognize that the fight has moved on without them, that they're no longer an asset, but a liability." "With respect, sir," Sarah said quietly. "I passed my last physical fitness test with scores that exceeded 70% of active operators. My weapon qualifications are current and excellent. My medical clearance is—" "Your medical clearance," Bowen interrupted, "shows arthritis in both knees, a shoulder that's been surgically repaired twice, and a stress fracture in your left foot that never properly healed. Should I continue?" The crowd had gone silent. Everyone knew medical records were supposed to be confidential. The fact that Bowen had accessed hers and was now broadcasting her injuries to the entire command was both unethical and possibly illegal. But who was going to call him on it? He was a rising star in naval special warfare destined for admiral someday. She was a 52-year-old anomaly, a living reminder of political battles fought over women in combat. "Torres," Bowen said, turning back to the trainee, "I'm going to give you one more chance, and I want you to understand something very clearly. This isn't about hurting Commander McKenna. This is about showing her the respect she deserves, the respect of treating her like any other operator. In the real world, enemies don't pull their punches. They don't go easy because you're older or because you're female. They kill you. So when I tell you to punch her teeth out, I'm not being cruel. I'm being realistic." He stepped closer to Torres, his voice dropping to a stage whisper that everyone could still hear. "Now engage her again, and this time show some respect for her service by treating her like the warrior she claims to be." Sarah saw the trap for what it was. If Torres actually hurt her, Bowen would use it as evidence that she couldn't handle modern combat. If Torres held back, Bowen would humiliate both of them. Either way, Bowen won. Torres looked at her. Sarah saw the question in his eyes. "What do I do?" She gave him the answer with her stance shifting into a ready position that signaled clearly, "Come at me. Really come at me." Torres took a breath and attacked. This time there was real commitment behind his movements. A jab-cross combination that forced Sarah to slip and weave. A low kick that she had to check with her knee. A clinch attempt that required her to break his grip and create separation. They exchanged maybe 15 seconds of genuine combat. Sarah's body remembered patterns drilled into muscle memory over 3 decades. Block, counter, redirect. Use his momentum. Don't fight strength with strength. Fighting was physics and psychology, and she understood both better than men half her age. She ended the exchange by catching Torres's arm mid-punch, rotating it until his elbow was hyperextended and sweeping his leg out from under him. He went down hard, but controlled. Sarah released him immediately and stepped back. The compound was silent. "Is that all you've got, Torres?" Bowen's voice shattered the moment. "She's 52 years old. She should be home knitting sweaters for her grandchildren, not embarrassing young operators on the training mat." "Sir," Torres said, climbing to his feet, "Commander McKenna's technique is— I don't want to hear about her technique." Bowen's face had gone from red to purple. "I want to see you treat her like an enemy combatant. I want to see you punch her teeth out." There it was. The order crystal clear, impossible to misinterpret. Torres looked genuinely distressed now. "Sir, with respect, I don't think that's—" "You don't think?" Bowen said coldly. That's your problem, Torres. You don't think, you feel. You worry about optics and feelings and all the touchy-feely garbage that's infected this institution. Let me make this very simple for you. Either you engage Commander McKenna with full commitment, demonstrating the combat effectiveness of a modern SEAL operator, or I will recommend your immediate dismissal from this command for failure to follow orders. Sarah watched Torres process the ultimatum. She could see the calculations running behind his eyes. His entire career, everything he'd worked for, balanced against the order to genuinely try to hurt a senior officer. Before Torres could respond, another voice cut through the tension. "That's enough, Lieutenant Commander." Everyone turned. Master Chief Petty Officer Raymond Sullivan was walking across the compound, his weathered face set in an expression that had made insurgents surrender without firing a shot. At 63, Sullivan was a living legend in naval special warfare, a man who'd been everywhere, done everything, and survived what shouldn't have been survivable. Master Chief Bowen said, his voice carefully controlled. "I don't recall requesting senior enlisted input on my training protocols." Sullivan stopped at the edge of the circle. "And I don't recall asking your permission, sir." The word sir was technically respectful but carried an undertone that made it sound like an insult. "You're out of line, Master Chief." "Am I?" Sullivan looked around at the crowd. "Because it seems to me that what's out of line is a junior officer with limited operational experience ordering a trainee to assault a senior officer with 30 years of combat service. But maybe that's just my old-fashioned understanding of the chain of command." Bowen's jaw tightened. Commander McKenna volunteered for this demonstration. She's been advocating for women in special operations for her entire career. I'm simply giving her the opportunity to prove that those standards are appropriate. By ordering someone to punch her teeth out. Sullivan's voice was flat. "That's your idea of appropriate standards testing." "What I'm trying to demonstrate," Bowen said, "is that combat doesn't care about gender or age or political correctness. Combat is brutal and unforgiving, and if Commander McKenna wants to remain in an operational status, she needs to prove she can handle that reality." Sullivan nodded slowly. "You're right about one thing. Combat is brutal and unforgiving, which is why it's interesting that Commander McKenna has more confirmed kills than any 10 operators on this compound combined. Why her survival rate on high-risk operations is statistically improbable. Why she's been awarded 3 Bronze Stars with Valor and a Silver Star, all for combat action, not for filing paperwork with exceptional attention to detail." The crowd stirred. Some of them knew Sarah's record. Most didn't. The classified nature of special operations meant that most awards and achievements remained hidden, known only to those who needed to know. Bowen's expression shifted slightly. He was realizing he might have miscalculated. "Master Chief Sullivan," Sarah said quietly, "I appreciate your intervention, but it's not necessary. Lieutenant Commander Bowen is within his rights to evaluate my capabilities." Sullivan looked at her. Something passed between them, a communication built on decades of shared experience. "Your call, Commander," Sullivan said. Then he raised his voice. "But just so everyone here understands the context of what they're watching. 28 years ago, Commander McKenna, then Petty Officer McKenna, was part of an 8-person team in Somalia. The operation went bad. Ambush. Her entire team was killed except for one other person." Sarah's chest tightened. She knew where this was going. "That other person," Sullivan continued, "was my younger brother, Lieutenant Raymond Sullivan, Jr. He took 3 rounds protecting Commander McKenna. With his dying breath, he ordered her to survive, to get out, to keep going." The training compound had gone absolutely silent. "Commander McKenna carried my brother's body 12 miles through hostile territory," Sullivan said. "Alone, injured, 24 years old. She evaded enemy patrols, survived on rainwater, and refused extraction until she could bring my brother home. When the rescue team finally reached her, she was still moving forward, still carrying him, even though he'd been dead for 2 days." Sullivan turned his gaze back to Bowen. "So when you tell me she's too old, too weak, not up to modern standards, when you order some kid fresh out of training to punch her teeth out, I have to wonder what the hell you think you know about combat, about sacrifice, about what it actually takes to survive when everything goes to hell. Bowen's face had gone from purple to pale. I wasn't aware of that operation. No, Sullivan said. You weren't, because it's classified. Because the people involved don't brag about it. Because Commander McKenna has spent 3 decades quietly doing the work, while people like you collect ribbons for PowerPoint presentations. Sarah wanted to disappear. She didn't talk about Somalia. Ever. The memories were still too raw, still too painful. Sullivan bringing it up now in front of everyone felt like a betrayal, even though she knew he was trying to help. Master Chief, she said, her voice carrying a warning. Sullivan nodded. I've said my piece. He turned and walked away, leaving a wake of uncomfortable silence behind him. Bowen cleared his throat. Well, that was enlightening. But it doesn't change the fundamental question. Commander McKenna's past service is admirable, but we're not evaluating her past. We're evaluating her present capabilities. Sarah watched him scramble to recover his authority. Part of her, a small tired part, wondered if he was right. Maybe she was holding on too long. Maybe the fight had moved past her. Then she thought about the young female SEAL candidates she'd been mentoring, about the battles still being fought over whether women belonged in special operations, about all the people who'd sacrificed to open these doors and how easily they'd slam shut if she walked away now. You want an evaluation, Sarah said. Fine, but let's make it fair. Bowen's eyes narrowed. What do you mean? I mean, Torres here is fresh out of buddies. All muscle, no experience. That's not a fair comparison to someone with 3 decades in the field. If you want to prove I'm obsolete, pair me with someone who actually knows what they're doing. The crowd buzzed. This was unexpected. Bowen smiled slowly. You want to face an experienced operator. I want to face someone who represents your modern standards, Sarah said. Someone you consider the future of naval special warfare. Someone who'll give me a real test. She could see the gears turning behind Bowen's eyes. He was realizing she'd just handed him exactly what he wanted, a chance to humiliate her in front of everyone with no more ambiguity about whether her opponent was holding back. All right, Bowen said. I'll give you that opportunity. Chief Petty Officer Marcus Webb, front and center. A ripple went through the crowd as a man stepped forward. Sarah recognized him, 31 years old, recently returned from deployment with a reputation as one of the best hand-to-hand combat instructors in the command. Webb was everything Bowen valued: young, aggressive, technically perfect. Webb looked uncomfortable. Sir, You don't think Commander McKenna can handle it? Bowen asked innocently. Because if that's true, then she's already proven my point. But something tells me Commander McKenna isn't the type to volunteer for something she can't handle. Are you, Commander? Sarah met Webb's eyes. It's fine, Chief. Let's give them a show. Webb stepped into the circle. Unlike Torres, he showed no hesitation, no uncertainty. He was a professional, and he'd approach this like any other training exercise. They circled each other. Sarah was very aware of her body now. The stiffness in her knees, the ache in her rebuilt shoulder. The extra beat her heart needed to pump blood through veins that had seen too many stress hormones. Webb attacked first. A feint high, actual strike low. Good technique. Sarah blocked, countered, found herself defending against a combination that would have overwhelmed most operators. But she wasn't most operators. The thing about experience, real experience earned over 3 decades, was pattern recognition. Sarah had fought in a dozen different countries against dozens of different styles. Her body remembered things her conscious mind had forgotten. She knew what was coming before Webb did it, not through psychic ability, but through the tiny tells everyone gave before they moved. They exchanged strikes for maybe 45 seconds. Sarah felt her age in every movement, but she also felt something else, the absolute certainty that came from having done this so many times that technique had become instinct. She ended it by waiting for Webb to overextend just slightly, just enough, and then taking his balance with a sweep that sent him to the ground hard enough to knock the wind from his lungs. Sarah stepped back, breathing hard but controlled. The compound was silent again. Webb climbed to his feet, rubbing his ribs. Jesus Christ, he said, and Sarah couldn't tell if it was respect or shock. Bowen stood frozen, his expression cycling through disbelief, anger, and something that might have been grudging respect. "So," Sarah said, still catching her breath. "Do I pass your evaluation, Lieutenant Commander?" Before Bowen could respond, Sarah's tactical watch vibrated. She glanced at it, saw the coded message, felt her world shift. Mozambique. Immediate. Volunteer only. Admiral Holland. Sarah looked up at Bowen. "Permission to accept an overseas assignment, sir." Bowen blinked, still processing what had just happened. "What?" "I'm receiving a request for immediate deployment. Do I have your permission to accept?" Something in Bowen's expression shifted. He saw an escape route from this humiliation. "Granted, immediately. Maybe you'll find something more appropriate for your skill set. Supply chain logistics. Medical liaison." Sarah almost smiled. Bowen had no idea what Admiral James Holland's volunteer-only missions entailed. They were the operations nobody talked about, the ones that never appeared in after-action reports, the ones where survival was optional and success was mandatory. "Thank you, sir," Sarah said. She turned to leave the training circle. "Commander McKenna," Bowen called after her. His voice had regained some of its earlier confidence. "When you return, if you return, I'll be filing a formal recommendation that you transition to a non-operational role. You've had a distinguished career, but continuing to pretend you're still a frontline operator isn't doing anyone any favors. It's time to accept reality." Sarah stopped, turned back, looked at Bowen with an expression that made him take an involuntary step backward. "Reality," she said quietly, "is something you learn by experiencing it, not by reading about it in briefing packets, not by watching PowerPoint presentations. Reality is what happens when everything goes wrong and you have to keep moving anyway. When your friends are dying and the mission is falling apart and you're the only one left who can fix it." She took a step toward him. "You want to talk about reality, Lieutenant Commander? I'll tell you about reality. Reality is that there are exactly 4 active SEAL operators who've survived more combat deployments than me. Reality is that my kill count is classified because if it became public, it would raise questions about operations the government doesn't want to acknowledge. Reality is that I've forgotten more about warfare than you'll learn in your entire career." Another step closer. Bowen was backed up against the edge of the training circle, now surrounded by 300 operators who were watching this exchange with rapt attention. "And here's the final reality," Sarah said. "When Admiral Holland sends a volunteer-only message, it means the mission is so dangerous, so complex, so utterly fucked that they can't order anyone to do it. They can only ask, and they're asking me. Not you, not Chief Webb, not any of these young, fast, modern operators you're so impressed with. Me, the 52-year-old dinosaur you think should be knitting sweaters." She leaned in close enough that only Bowen could hear her next words. "So here's my suggestion, Lieutenant Commander. While I'm overseas handling reality, you stay here and keep playing soldier with your trainees. Keep polishing your ribbons. Keep telling yourself that youth and arrogance are substitutes for experience and skill. And when I come back, if I come back, you can file all the recommendations you want. Because by then, I'll have done something you'll never do, something real." Sarah stepped back, her voice returning to normal volume. "If you'll excuse me, sir, I have a mission to prepare for." She walked away, leaving Bowen standing in the middle of the training circle. His face flushed, his authority shattered, his carefully constructed humiliation of Sarah McKenna transformed into something else entirely. Behind her, Sarah heard the whispers starting, heard the shift in energy, heard someone she thought it might be Torres say quietly, "Holy shit." Master Chief Sullivan was waiting at the edge of the compound. He fell into step beside her as she headed toward the armory. "That was quite a speech," Sullivan said. He had it coming. "No argument there." Sullivan was quiet for a moment. "Holland's sending you to Mozambique, apparently. Alone." Message said volunteer only. Doesn't say solo, but it implies small team. Very small. Sullivan nodded. "In Como." Sarah stopped walking. "How do you know about Nkomo?" "Because I'm the one who passed the intelligence to Holland. Victor Nkomo. warlord arms dealer, and as of 3 weeks ago selling American military secrets to Chinese intelligence. Devgru was supposed to handle it, but the operation got compromised. And Como knows we're coming. He's been preparing. So Holland wants someone unexpected. Holland wants someone smart enough to adapt when everything goes wrong, Sullivan said. Someone with enough experience to improvise. Someone who can operate without support in hostile territory. Someone old and disposable, Sarah said. Sullivan didn't deny it. The mission's survival rate is estimated at 30%. That's why it's volunteer only. Holland won't order anyone to die. Sarah started walking again. What else do I need to know? Nkomo's compound is in guerrilla-controlled territory, 50 miles from any friendly forces. The extraction window is tight, 4 hours from infiltration to exfil. If you miss it, you're on your own for 3 days minimum before another extraction attempt becomes viable. What's the intelligence quality? Mediocre at best. We know where Nkomo is. We know approximately how many fighters he has. Beyond that, Sullivan shrugged. You'll be operating blind. They reached the armory. Sarah started to go in, then stopped. Sullivan, she said, why did you bring up Somalia back there? The old Master Chief was quiet for a long moment. Because Bowen needed to understand who he was dealing with, and because those kids needed to know that the person they're laughing at has already paid prices they can't imagine. Your brother wouldn't have wanted you to use his death to score points in a pissing contest. My brother, Sullivan said quietly, told you to survive, to keep going, to show everyone what you're made of. That's what I'm helping you do. Sarah felt tears prick her eyes and forced them back. I think about him every day. I know. Sullivan put a hand on her shoulder. That's why you're still here. That's why you keep fighting even when assholes like Bowen make it clear you're not welcome. Because Raymond asked you to survive. And you've been honoring that request for 28 years. I'm tired, Sullivan. I know that too. He squeezed her shoulder. Do this mission. Come back. Then we'll talk about what comes next. But don't let Bowen push you into retiring out of spite. Don't let him take this from you before you're ready to let it go. Sarah nodded. I need to prep. I'll have your team roster sent to your quarters within the hour. What team? Sullivan smiled. You think Holland's sending you solo? You're good, McKenna, but you're not that good. 3 operators. Young, skilled, and fair warning, they don't know who they're working with yet. Holland wanted the team assignments to remain classified until Wheels Up. Why? Because 2 of them specifically requested not to work with female operators, and the third has a reputation for washing out female SEAL candidates during training. Holland wants them locked in before they know what they're getting into. Sarah felt a familiar weight settle onto her shoulders. So I'll be fighting my own team before I even get to the actual enemy. Welcome to the reality of being a woman in naval special warfare, Sullivan said. Still think you want to keep doing this? Sarah thought about Bowen's sneering face, about the laughter of the crowd, about 28 years of proving herself over and over and over again only to have each new generation of officers question whether she belonged. Then she thought about Raymond Sullivan Jr. bleeding out in the Somali dirt, whispering, "Survive, show them." Yeah, Sarah said. I still want to keep doing this. Good. Sullivan turned to leave, then stopped. McKenna, don't die in Mozambique. I've already lost one person I care about to this profession. I'd rather not lose another. I'll do my best, Master Chief. Your best, Sullivan said, has kept you alive this long. Let's hope it's enough for one more mission. He walked away, leaving Sarah standing outside the armory, contemplating the tactical watch, still displaying Admiral Holland's message. Mozambique, immediate, volunteer only. Translation. Someone needs to do something impossible, and we're hoping you're crazy enough to try. Sarah took a deep breath and went inside to select her weapons. Behind her back at the training compound, Lieutenant Commander Derek Bowen was gathering his junior officers, already spinning the morning's events into a narrative that would protect his reputation. Already planning how to frame Sarah's deployment as evidence of her desperate attempt to remain relevant. He had no idea that in 72 hours, Sarah McKenna would do something that would make this morning's humiliation look like a playground disagreement. He had no idea that the woman he'd just ordered to be assaulted, the woman he'd dismissed as obsolete, was about to become a legend. He had no idea that sometimes the most dangerous opponent isn't the one with the most strength. It's the one with nothing left to lose and everything to prove. Sarah selected her primary weapon, a modified HK-416 with custom optics, and began her pre-mission ritual. The familiar mechanical motions of checking, cleaning, loading. The meditation of preparation. Somewhere in Mozambique, Victor Nkomo was preparing too, waiting for the American operators he knew were coming, ready to prove that his intelligence, his preparation, his superior numbers would overcome whatever force the Americans sent against him. He had no idea what was coming. Neither Sarah reflected, did she? But that was the nature of reality, the thing Bowen would never understand. Reality wasn't something you controlled. Reality was something you survived. And Sarah McKenna had been surviving the impossible for 28 years. One more mission wouldn't change that, or it would end it permanently. Either way, she was going to find out. The armory door closed behind her with a soft click, sealing her away from the morning's humiliation, from Bowen's contempt, from everything except the mission ahead. In 3 hours, she would meet her team. In 6 hours, they would be wheels up. In 12 hours, they would be in Mozambique. And then reality, the real kind, not Bowen's theoretical version, would arrive with all its brutal, unforgiving clarity. Sarah finished loading her magazines and moved to the equipment cage to select her tactical gear. Behind her, forgotten on the workbench, her tactical watch displayed a second message. This one was from Admiral Holland, directly encrypted, marked for her eyes. Only. Sarah. I know what Bowen did this morning. I know what you're walking into. I wouldn't ask if there was anyone else. Nkomo has intelligence that could compromise every special operations asset in East Africa. We need him neutralized or captured. We need the intelligence recovered. And we need it done by someone smart enough to survive when the op goes sideways. That's you. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. But I need you one more time. JH. Sarah read the message, deleted it, and continued prepping her gear. Admiral Holland was right about one thing. She was smart enough to survive when operations went sideways. She'd been proving that her entire career. Time to prove it one more time. Time to show everyone, Bowen, her team, herself, what reality actually looked like when you stopped pretending and started surviving. The night air would be hot in Mozambique. The jungle would be hostile. The enemy would be waiting. And somewhere in the middle of it all, Commander Sarah McKenna would do what she'd always done. Keep moving forward. Keep surviving. Keep honoring the promise she'd made 28 years ago in the blood-soaked sand of Somalia. The mission was impossible. Perfect. She'd been doing impossible things her entire life. What was one more? The briefing room was empty when Sarah arrived at 0600 hours. She'd had 3 hours of sleep, which was 3 hours more than she'd expected. Her gear was packed, her weapons cleaned, and loaded, her mental state locked into what Sullivan called mission mode, that cold, focused clarity where emotion became secondary to execution. The door opened behind her. Sarah turned to see 3 men enter, each carrying the relaxed confidence of operators who'd been told they were heading out, but hadn't been told with whom. The first was Chief Petty Officer Marcus Webb, the same man she'd put on the ground 6 hours earlier. His expression shifted when he saw her surprise, quickly masked by professional neutrality. The second was Petty Officer Ryan Ortiz, 28, with a reputation for being obsessively by the book. Sarah had reviewed his file during her sleepless hours. Ortiz had washed out 3 female SEAL candidates during training, citing inability to maintain standards. 2 of those candidates had later qualified under different instructors. The third was Petty Officer Jake Morrison, 26, fresh off his second deployment. Morrison's file showed solid performance, but a pattern of requesting transfers away from any command with female leadership. Sullivan hadn't been kidding. These 3 were exactly the wrong team for her, or exactly the right test. "Gentlemen," Sarah said, "take a seat." Webb stopped in the doorway. "Commander McKenna, I didn't realize you'd be briefing us." "I'm not briefing you," Sarah said. "I'm leading you. Sit down." Morrison looked at Ortiz. Ortiz looked at Webb. Webb looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. "There a problem, Chief?" Sarah asked. Webb moved to the table and sat. "No, ma'am. No problem." The other two followed. Sarah could feel the tension radiating off them, could see the unspoken questions in their body language, could read exactly what they were thinking because she'd been reading it for 30 years. "Let me save us all some time," Sarah said. "You're wondering why Admiral Holland assigned you to work with a female operator. You're concerned about whether I can keep up. You're worried that political correctness has compromised operational effectiveness. You're thinking about how to request a transfer without damaging your careers." Morrison's jaw tightened. Ortiz stared at the table. Webb met her eyes. "Since we're being honest," Webb said, "yeah, those concerns exist." "Good," Sarah said. "I prefer honest skepticism to polite lies. Here's what you need to know. This is a volunteer mission. Estimated survival rate is 30%. Target is Victor Nkomo, arms dealer and intelligence broker. He's selling American military secrets to Chinese intelligence. Our job is to capture or kill him and recover the intelligence he's been trading." She pulled up a map on the briefing room screen. "Nkomo's compound is here 50 miles inside guerrilla-controlled territory in northern Mozambique. Previous operation was compromised. Nkomo knows we're coming. He's been preparing." "Jesus," Morrison muttered. "That's a suicide mission." "That's why it's volunteer only," Sarah said. "And that's why you three were selected. Webb, you're the best hand-to-hand combat instructor in the command. Ortiz, your tactical planning scores are perfect. Morrison, you've got more combat hours than operators twice your age. You're good, you're skilled, and if we do this right, you'll survive to tell your grandchildren about it." "What's the intelligence quality?" Ortiz asked. "Mediocre. We know where Nkomo is. We know he's got approximately 30 to 40 fighters. Beyond that, we're operating blind." Webb leaned forward. "Extraction plan. 4-hour window from infiltration to exfil. Miss that window, we're on foot for 3 days through hostile territory before another extraction becomes viable. Backup support. None. We're off the books. If something goes wrong, there's no quick reaction force, no air support, no rescue. We succeed or we don't come home." The room went silent. Sarah watched them process the reality of what they'd volunteered for, watched the moment when bravado collided with tactical assessment. "I want to be clear about something," Sarah said. "I didn't ask for this mission. Admiral Holland asked me because I've survived worse. I didn't ask for you three as my team. Sullivan assigned you because you're good enough to make this work. What happened this morning at the training compound, that's done. Irrelevant. What matters now is whether you can put aside whatever preconceptions you have and focus on keeping each other alive." Morrison spoke up. "With respect, Commander, the concerns aren't about preconceptions. They're about operational effectiveness. Physical standards exist for a reason." "You're right," Sarah said. "They do, and I exceed them. What else?" "Age matters in combat," Morrison continued. "Reaction time, endurance, recovery from injury." "I'm not asking you to ignore reality," Sarah interrupted. "I'm asking you to expand your definition of it. Yes, I'm slower than you. I can't carry as much weight for as long. My knees hurt every morning and my shoulder sounds like Rice Krispies when I rotate it. But I've survived 18 combat deployments. I've been the sole survivor of operations that killed everyone else. I've forgotten more about warfare than most operators ever learn." She looked at each of them. "So here's the deal. You don't have to like me. You don't have to respect me. You don't even have to think I belong here. But you do have to follow orders. And if you can't do that, tell me now. Because once we're wheels up, doubt kills teams faster than enemy bullets." Webb broke the silence. "I can work with you, Commander." Ortiz nodded slowly. "Same." Morrison took longer. Sarah could see the internal struggle playing out behind his eyes. Finally, "Roger that, ma'am." "Good," Sarah said. "Because we've got 3 hours until wheels up, and I need you all mission ready by then. Questions?" "Yeah," Webb said. "This morning at the training compound, how did you know I was going to overextend on that last combination?" Sarah almost smiled. "Because you always do. You favor your right side. When you get aggressive, you commit about 2% too much weight forward. It's subtle, but it's there. I noticed it watching you train last week. Webb blinked. You've been watching me train. I've been watching all of you. That's my job. Morrison, you have a tell when you're about to change positions. You shift your weight to your rear foot about half a second before you move. Ortiz, your tactical plans are perfect on paper, but you hesitate to adapt when circumstances change. You all have patterns, strengths and weaknesses. That's not criticism, that's reality. And my job is to know those patterns well enough to keep you alive when everything goes wrong. The atmosphere in the room shifted slightly. Not to acceptance, but to something closer to it. To the recognition that maybe possibly this 52-year-old woman knew what she was doing. Gear check in 1 hour, Sarah said. Ortiz, I want you to brief escape and evasion routes. Morrison, review the compound layout and identify vulnerability points. Webb, work with me on hand signal protocols. We're operating in radio silence once we're on target. I need to know we can communicate without words. They stood, started to leave. One more thing, Sarah said. They turned back. This morning, Lieutenant Commander Bowen asked someone to punch my teeth out. In approximately 24 hours, we're going to be in a situation where the enemy will be trying to kill all of us. The difference between those two scenarios is that the enemy will be trying to kill you too. So whatever you think about women in special operations, whatever concerns you have about my age or capability, set them aside. Because I'm not your enemy. And I'm not your problem. I'm the person who's going to get you home alive. Webb met her eyes. Yes, ma'am. They left. Sarah stood alone in the briefing room, staring at the map of Mozambique, calculating distances and timelines and survival probabilities. Her watch vibrated. A message from Sullivan. How'd they take it? Sarah replied. About as well as expected. They'll follow orders. Whether they trust me is another question. Trust is earned in the field. You know that. Yeah, I just wish I didn't have to keep earning it. Welcome to being a pioneer. It never gets easier. Sarah deleted the message thread and headed to the armory. Her shoulder was already aching, which meant the next 24 hours would be hell on her body. But pain was manageable. Pain was something you pushed through. Doubt was harder. Not doubt in her abilities. She'd proven those 1,000 times. Doubt in whether it was worth it anymore. Whether the constant battle to justify her existence was sustainable. Whether Bowen might actually be right about one thing, that there came a time to let go. She found Morrison in the equipment cage, checking his tactical vest. Petty officer, Sarah said. Morrison looked up. Ma'am, I reviewed your file. You've requested 3 transfers in the past year. Each time you were assigned to work under or with female officers or operators. Want to tell me why? Morrison's expression closed down. Personal preference, nothing more. Personal preference or professional concern? Does it matter? It does if it affects your performance on this mission. Morrison set down his vest. Look, Commander, I'll follow orders. I'll do my job. But you asked for honesty, so here it is. I've seen what happens when standards get lowered for political reasons. I've watched operators get hurt because someone who shouldn't have been there couldn't keep up. I don't have anything against women personally. I just think that some professions have requirements that can't be compromised. And you think women can't meet those requirements. I think most can't. And I think the exceptions shouldn't require everyone else to adjust their expectations. Sarah nodded. Fair enough. So let me tell you what I expect from you. I expect you to keep up. I expect you to follow orders without hesitation. I expect you to cover your sector and maintain your weapon. I expect you to adapt when the plan fails, because the plan always fails. And I expect you to get your ass back to the extraction point alive, because I don't plan on explaining to your mother why I got her son killed. And what should I expect from you? Morrison asked. The same things, Sarah said, plus one additional item. I expect you to watch me operate for the next 24 hours and then decide whether your concerns about women in special operations are based on actual observed performance or on assumptions you've never questioned. Morrison studied her. And if I still think I'm right, then when we get back, you can request a transfer and I'll approve it personally. No questions asked. No damage to your record. But until then, you're on my team, and you'll perform like it. Deal, Morrison said. Sarah turned to leave, then stopped. Morrison, for what it's worth, I understand your concerns. Standards matter. Performance matters. But so does adaptability. The operators who survive aren't the ones who are strongest or fastest. They're the ones who can think under pressure and adjust when everything goes to hell. Keep that in mind. She left him in the equipment cage and headed to find Ortiz. The young petty officer was in the planning room staring at satellite imagery of the target compound. See something interesting? Sarah asked. Ortiz jumped slightly. Commander, I didn't hear you come in. That's the idea. Sarah moved to stand beside him. What are you looking at? The compound's defensive layout, and Como's positioned his guards here, here, and here. Ortiz pointed to the imagery. Standard perimeter defense, but there's a weakness. Where? The western approach. See this drainage culvert? It runs from outside the perimeter directly under the compound wall. It's too small for most operators, but someone smaller could potentially... He stopped realizing what he was suggesting. Could use it for infiltration, Sarah finished. Good eye. Add it to the backup plan options. Ortiz hesitated. Commander, I need to say something. Go ahead. The candidates I washed out of training. I've been told that was controversial. That people think I was discriminating. Were you? No. Ortiz's voice was firm. I was maintaining standards. The same standards I apply to everyone. If anything, I was harder on them because I knew people would question their qualifications. I thought I was helping. Thought I was making sure only the best made it through. And now I'm wondering if maybe I was so focused on protecting standards that I stopped seeing people. Stopped recognizing that different operators bring different strengths. He looked at the map again. Like this drainage culvert, a larger operator wouldn't even consider it an option, but someone smaller, someone more flexible, that becomes a tactical advantage. Sarah felt something shift in her chest. This was progress, small but real. Ortiz, she said, standards exist for a reason. You're right about that. But standards should measure what matters: mission, success, team, survival, operational effectiveness, not whether someone fits a predetermined profile. Keep that in mind when you're evaluating people. Yes, ma'am. Webb found her an hour later in the weapons maintenance room. Sarah was field stripping her HK-416, checking each component with the kind of obsessive attention that 3 decades had made automatic. Commander, Webb said, can we talk about this morning? About this morning. Webb sat across from her. I didn't hold back. When we sparred, I want you to know that. I know. But you still put me down. I did. Webb was quiet for a moment. How? Honestly, you're 52. I'm 31. I train 6 days a week. I'm stronger, faster, better conditioned. So how did you beat me? Sarah continued working on her weapon. Because fighting isn't about strength or speed. It's about pattern recognition and decision-making. You've trained for 8 years. I've been doing this for 30. Every time you moved, I knew what was coming because I've seen it before. Your technique is perfect, but it's predictable. And predictability is a weakness. So experience beats youth. Experience compensates for diminished physical capability, Sarah corrected. But only to a point. Give it another 10 years and you'd beat me easily. My body can't keep doing this forever. Then why are you still doing it? Sarah reassembled her weapon, the mechanical movements buying her time to formulate an answer. Because someone has to prove it's possible. Because every time I quit, it becomes harder for the next woman to try. Because 28 years ago, a man I respected told me to survive and show people what I was made of. And I've been honoring that request ever since. Webb nodded slowly. The Somalia operation, Sullivan's brother. Yeah. Must be heavy, carrying that around. It is. Sarah looked up at him. But you know what's heavier? The thought that his sacrifice meant nothing. That I survived just to watch doors close behind me. That women like the ones Ortiz washed out of training won't get another chance because people decided the experiment failed. Is that what this mission is? Webb asked. One more chance to prove something. This mission, Sarah said, is about stopping a warlord from selling intelligence that will get American operators killed. Everything else is secondary. But not irrelevant. No, not irrelevant. Sarah stood slinging her weapon. Webb, I'm going to be honest with you. This mission is dangerous as hell. The survival rate is 30%, and that's probably optimistic. You don't have to go. None of you do. It's volunteer only for a reason. Are you trying to talk me out of it? I'm making sure you understand what you're volunteering for. Webb stood as well. Commander, this morning I thought you were a political token, an affirmative action checkbox, someone the brass kept around to prove they were progressive. He met her eyes. I was wrong. You're a warrior. And if you're going into Mozambique, I want to be on your team. Not because I have to, because you're the kind of operator who brings people home alive. Sarah felt an unexpected surge of emotion and forced it down. Thank you, Chief. Don't thank me yet. Let's survive the next 24 hours. Then we can get sentimental. 2 hours later, they were wheels up. The C-130 transport aircraft climbed through the darkness, carrying them east toward Africa. Sarah sat in the cargo hold, surrounded by her team, each man lost in his own pre-mission ritual. Morrison was checking his weapon for the third time. Ortiz was reviewing the mission plan on a tablet. Webb was sleeping or pretending to. The ability to rest before combat was a skill that separated veterans from novices. Sarah's own ritual was memory. She thought about every mission that had gone wrong, every ambush, every close call. She replayed Somalia in her mind, not to torture herself, but to remember the lessons, to catalog the mistakes and the adaptations, and the 1,000 tiny decisions that had kept her alive. The loadmaster approached. Commander Admiral Holland wants to speak with you. Private line. Sarah moved to the communication station and put on the headset. McKenna. Sarah. Holland's voice was tired. How's the team? Functional, skeptical, professional. I heard about Bowen's performance this morning. News travels fast. Sullivan made sure it did. There are already calls for an investigation into Bowen's conduct. Accessing your medical records, ordering an assault on a superior officer, he crossed several lines. That's not my concern right now, Admiral. I know. But I want you to understand something. Regardless of what happens in Mozambique, Bowen's career is over. You won't be coming back to face his bullshit. That chapter is closed. Sarah felt something unclench in her chest. Thank you, sir. Don't thank me. You earned this. 30 years of excellence earned this. Holland paused. Sarah, I need to tell you something about Nkomo, something that's not in the briefing. Sarah's grip tightened on the headset. Sir? The intelligence he's been selling, it's not random. He's been specifically targeting information about female operators. Names, assignments, capabilities. We think he's building a database for someone. Who? We don't know. But Sarah, your name is on that list. Your entire operational history. If Nkomo gets that information to whoever's buying, you become a target. Not just professionally, personally. Sarah absorbed this. So this mission isn't just about stopping him. It's about protecting myself. And every other female operator in special warfare. If this database goes public, if it gets used for targeting or propaganda. Holland didn't finish the sentence. I understand, sir. There's one more thing. The intelligence suggests Nkomo knows a female operator is coming. He's been preparing specifically for that scenario. Sarah, he's planning something, a trap within the trap, and we don't know what it is. Then I'll have to be better at improvising than he is at planning. That's what I'm counting on. Holland's voice softened. Sarah, you don't have to do this. I can scrub the mission. Find another way. There is no other way. You said it yourself, this is time sensitive. If Nkomo delivers that database before we stop him, the damage is done. I know, but I had to offer. Holland was quiet for a moment. Come home safe. That's an order. I'll do my best, Admiral. The connection ended. Sarah sat in the darkness of the cargo hold, processing what she'd just learned. Nkomo knew she was coming. He'd been planning for her specifically, which meant everything about this mission was compromised from the start. She should tell her team, should warn them that the intelligence was worse than they'd been briefed, that the danger was more specific and more personal. But she knew what would happen if she did. Morrison would use it as evidence that female operators were liabilities. Ortiz would question whether personal stakes compromised her judgment. Even Webb might wonder if she was the right person to lead this mission. So she said nothing. She returned to her seat in the cargo hold and began the final mental preparations for insertion. 8 hours later, they were on the ground in Mozambique. The heat hit them like a physical force, thick and wet and smelling of vegetation and distant wood smoke. Their insertion point was a cleared field 15 miles from Nkomo's compound, far enough to avoid detection, but close enough to reach the target within the operational window. "Radio silence from this point forward," Sarah said quietly. "Hand signals only unless we're in contact. Ortiz, you've got point. Morrison, rear security. Webb, you're with me on the approach plan. Questions?" No one spoke. "Then let's move. We've got 4 hours to get in, complete the mission, and get back to the extraction point. Clock starts now." They moved into the jungle, 4 shadows disappearing into the darkness. The vegetation was dense, forcing them into single file along a game trail that wound through the terrain. Sarah's body protested immediately, her knees aching, her shoulder stiff, her back reminding her of every hard landing and rough extraction of the past 3 decades. She pushed through it. Pain was irrelevant. Comfort was a luxury. Forward momentum was all that mattered. After 2 hours of movement, Ortiz raised his fist. The team froze. Sarah moved forward carefully, coming up beside him. Ortiz pointed. Through the vegetation barely visible in the darkness was a checkpoint. 3 men with AK-47s looking bored but alert enough to be dangerous. Sarah studied the position. The checkpoint wasn't on their planned route, which meant either their intelligence was wrong or Nkomo had added security. She made a decision. Hand signals. Go around. Wide berth. Slow and quiet. The team adjusted their route, adding 15 minutes to their timeline, but avoiding contact. They passed within 50 yards of the checkpoint, close enough to hear the guards talking, far enough to remain undetected. It was a reminder. This operation was already off script. The environment was different than briefed. The enemy was more prepared than expected. They continued forward. At the 3-hour mark, they reached the ridge overlooking Nkomo's compound. Sarah used her night vision to scan the target. What she saw made her blood run cold. The compound wasn't defended by 30 to 40 fighters, it was defended by at least 70, and they weren't just positioned at the perimeter. They were staged in depth, with overlapping fields of fire, clear fallback positions, and what looked like prepared ambush points along every approach route. Webb came up beside her, saw what she was seeing, and made a gesture. Abort. Sarah studied the compound, thought about the intelligence Nkomo was selling, thought about the database with her name on it, thought about every female operator who would become a target if this information went public. She signaled back, adapt. New plan. She gathered the team and used hand signals to explain her thinking. The compound was too well defended for a direct assault, but there was still that drainage culvert Ortiz had identified. If Sarah could infiltrate alone, get inside the compound and locate Nkomo while the others created a distraction. Morrison grabbed her wrist, shook his head violently. Too dangerous. Sarah removed his hand and pointed to herself, then to the culvert, then to her watch. She had a window. She could make it work. Webb was signaling, we stay together. Team integrity. Sarah understood their concern, but she also understood tactics. One person had a chance. 4 people would be detected and killed. She made the decision signal final, non-negotiable. Then she started removing gear, extra ammunition, radio. Everything that would slow her down or make noise in the tight confines of the culvert. Morrison looked like he wanted to argue. Ortiz looked terrified. Webb looked resigned. Sarah checked her sidearm, her knife, and the small explosive charges she'd used to destroy the intelligence database if capture became unavoidable. She met each man's eyes and gave them the signal they'd drilled. Trust me. Then she moved toward the culvert, leaving her team behind, knowing that the next hour would either prove she was the warrior she claimed to be, or prove that Bowen had been right all along. The culvert entrance was exactly where Ortiz's analysis had placed it, Sarah crawled inside, feeling the concrete walls press against her shoulders, feeling water dripping on her back, feeling her heart rate spike with the claustrophobia. Forward. Always forward. The darkness was absolute. The silence was broken only by her breathing and the distant sound of water. Sarah counted her movements, building a mental map of distance and direction. After what felt like an eternity but was probably 5 minutes, she saw light ahead. The culvert's exit point inside the compound wall. Sarah moved to the opening and looked out. She was in a corner of the compound that appeared unused. Storage containers and refuse. No guards visible. She emerged from the culvert, water dripping from her gear, her body aching from the confined crawl. She pressed against a wall and took a moment to orient herself. Nkomo's command building was ahead, lit by generator-powered lights. Sarah could see movement through the windows, could hear voices speaking in Portuguese and what sounded like Mandarin. Chinese intelligence was here, in person, which meant the transaction was happening now. Sarah had minutes, not hours. She moved through the shadows using the skills she'd refined over 30 years. Read the patterns of the guards, identify the gaps in coverage, exploit the momentary distractions. She reached the command building and found a window. Inside, she could see Nkomo, a tall man in his 50s wearing expensive clothes that looked absurd in the guerrilla compound. He was talking with 2 Chinese men in business suits. Between them on a table was a laptop. The database. Had to be. Sarah assessed her options. She could try to breach the building kill or capture Nkomo and grab the laptop, but the Chinese would escape. The intelligence would still be compromised. Or she could do something else, something risky, something that went against every tactical principle she'd ever learned. She could let them make the transfer, let them think they'd succeeded, and then take them all down at once when they were relaxed and confident. It was a terrible plan, the kind of plan that got operators killed, but it was also the kind of plan that, if it worked, would end the threat completely. Sarah made her decision. She found a position in the shadows where she could observe the building and settled in to wait. Inside the command building, Nkomo was speaking. Sarah couldn't hear the words, but she could see the body language. The Chinese were examining the laptop, confirming the data, preparing to complete the transaction. Then one of the Chinese men did something unexpected. He pulled out a photograph and showed it to Nkomo. Nkomo smiled and nodded. The Chinese man held up the photograph to the window, and Sarah felt her world stop. It was a picture of her, from her service record, with a red circle drawn around her face. They weren't just buying intelligence about female operators. They were buying intelligence about her specifically, and Nkomo was confirming that she was the target of this operation. This wasn't a mission to capture an arms dealer. This was a trap. Nkomo knew she was here, knew she was coming. The entire operation had been designed to lure her in. Sarah's tactical watch vibrated. A message from Webb breaking radio silence. Compound alert level rising. Multiple patrols converging on your position. You need to exfil now. Sarah looked around, saw guards moving with purpose, saw searchlights beginning to sweep the compound, saw her window for extraction closing rapidly. She had maybe 2 minutes before they found her, maybe less. And in that moment, Sarah McKenna understood exactly what was happening. Understood why Admiral Holland had really sent her. Understood why the mission was volunteer only. She wasn't here to stop Nkomo. She was here to be stopped by him. She was the proof that female operators were a liability. The example that would close doors for a generation. And someone in the chain of command, maybe not Holland, but someone had set her up to fail. The rage that filled her was cold and focused. Not the hot anger of emotional response, but the icy fury of absolute clarity. They wanted her to fail, expected her to fail, had planned for her failure. Sarah smiled in the darkness. Then she stood up and walked directly toward the command building's front entrance. The guards at the front entrance didn't expect someone to simply walk up and knock. Sarah could see their confusion through the reinforced glass door. One of them reached for his radio. The other raised his weapon. Sarah raised her hands slowly, deliberately, made herself look exhausted and defeated. Let them see what they expected to see, a 52-year-old woman who'd realized she was outmatched. The door opened. 3 guards emerged, weapons trained on her center mass. One of them barked something in Portuguese. "English," Sarah said, keeping her voice tired. "I speak English. I want to talk to Nkomo." The guards exchanged glances. One spoke into his radio. A response crackled back. The guard gestured with his weapon. Inside, slowly. Sarah walked through the door, hands still raised. Her mind was calculating distances, counting weapons, cataloging threats. The front room contained 6 more guards. Through an open doorway, she could see Nkomo and the Chinese intelligence officers looking up from their laptop with expressions of shock. "Commander McKenna," Nkomo said, recovering quickly. A smile spread across his face. "Right on schedule. I was beginning to worry you wouldn't accept my invitation." "Your invitation?" Sarah kept her hands visible. "You mean the trap?" "I prefer to think of it as an opportunity." Nkomo gestured to his guards. "Search her. Carefully." They found her sidearm, her knife, the explosive charges. Stripped her of anything that could be weaponized. One guard reached for her tactical watch. "That's a medical monitor," Sarah lied smoothly. "Heart condition. You take it off, I might collapse. Wouldn't want me dying before you get what you came for." Nkomo studied her, then nodded. The guard left the watch. "Please," Nkomo said, gesturing to a chair. "Sit. You must be exhausted. Crawling through that drainage culvert at your age, very impressive. Very predictable, but impressive." Sarah sat. Let her body language communicate defeat. "You knew about the culvert. I left it open specifically for you. Well, for whichever female operator they sent. The psychological profile suggested that a woman would choose the indirect approach. Something about not wanting to risk your team. Very maternal. Very exploitable." One of the Chinese men stepped forward. "Commander McKenna, I am Colonel Chen Wei of the People's Liberation Army Strategic Support Force. We've been studying you for quite some time. Your file makes for fascinating reading. Glad I could entertain you." "Oh, you've done more than entertain." Chen pulled out a tablet, swiped through screens. 28 years of service, 18 combat deployments, estimated 217 confirmed hostile kills. Sole survivor of 3 separate ambush scenarios. You're quite the warrior commander, which makes this moment particularly satisfying. What moment is that? The moment we prove that even the best female operator is fundamentally inferior to male counterparts. That physical limitations inevitably lead to tactical vulnerability. That America's experiment with women in special operations is a dangerous failure. Chen smiled. Your capture tonight will provide empirical evidence that cannot be disputed. The propaganda value alone is worth millions. Sarah felt ice in her veins. This wasn't just about intelligence. This was about destroying the credibility of every woman in uniform. "There's one problem with your theory," Sarah said quietly. "What's that?" "I'm not captured. I walked in here voluntarily." Nkomo laughed. "Semantics, Commander. You're surrounded by 30 guards. Your weapons are confiscated. Your team is trapped outside the compound, probably deciding whether to abort or mount a futile rescue. You have no leverage, no advantage, no hope of escape. You can call it whatever you want, but the reality is clear." Sarah glanced at her tactical watch, saw the countdown she'd initiated when she decided to walk through that door. 4 minutes, 30 seconds. "You're right about one thing," Sarah said. "I don't have leverage, but I don't need it. Because in about 4 minutes, this entire compound is going to be a free fire zone." Nkomo's smile faded. "What are you talking about?" "My team. When I entered the compound, I triggered a dead man's switch. If I don't deactivate it within 5 minutes, they initiate contingency protocol. That's 3 operators with enough explosives and ammunition to turn your compound into a demonstration of American firepower. They'll start with your generator, cut the lights, and systematically eliminate every target they can acquire. They probably won't survive. But neither will most of your guards, and definitely not you." It was a complete lie. There was no dead man's switch, no contingency protocol. Webb Morrison and Ortiz had no idea what Sarah was doing or why. But Nkomo didn't know that. "You're bluffing," he said, but uncertainty crept into his voice. "Am I?" Sarah leaned back in her chair. "Ask yourself if I walked in here to surrender. Why would I do it now? Why not wait until extraction became impossible? Why not try to evade first? The answer is because walking in here was never about surrendering. It was about getting close enough to complete the mission. And if I have to die to do it, that's acceptable. My life in exchange for yours and the destruction of that intelligence database seems like a fair trade. Colonel Chen was speaking rapidly in Mandarin into his phone. Nkomo's guards were shifting nervously, looking toward the windows, suddenly aware that they might be targets. 3 minutes, Sarah said, glancing at her watch. Stop the countdown, Nkomo demanded. Why would I do that? I came here to neutralize you and recover the intelligence. Mission success is more important than survival. That's what being a soldier means, something your hired thugs wouldn't understand. Nkomo pulled out a radio, barked orders in Portuguese. Sarah heard the response guards reporting movement on the perimeter, possible contact on the western approach. Webb and the others had heard the increased alert. They were moving into position, not knowing why, but responding to the threat, accidentally confirming Sarah's bluff. 2 minutes, Sarah said. How do I know you'll actually stop it? Nkomo asked. How do I know this isn't a suicide mission? You don't, Sarah said. But ask yourself what I have to lose. I'm 52 years old. My career is ending whether I want it to or not. People like you and Colonel Chen are already writing the narrative about how women don't belong in combat. If I die tonight, I become a martyr. If I succeed, I become a legend. Either way, you lose. She could see the calculation in Nkomo's eyes, see him weighing the probabilities, see the exact moment when he realized he'd been outmaneuvered. What do you want? He asked. The laptop. You and Colonel Chen keep your hands visible. Your guards back away from the exits. I deactivate the countdown, walk out of here with the intelligence, and everyone lives to fight another day. And if I refuse, then in 90 seconds your compound turns into a war zone. My team kills as many of your people as possible before they're overwhelmed. You probably survive. But the Chinese delegation definitely doesn't. And you can explain to Beijing why their intelligence officers died because you couldn't let one middle-aged woman walk away with a laptop. Colonel Chen spoke up. Nkomo, he's paying you to be a broker, not a martyr. Give her the laptop. 1 minute, Sarah said. Nkomo made his decision. Everyone stand down. Let her take it. Sarah stood slowly, moved to the table, closed the laptop. Your radio. Slowly. Nkomo handed it over. Sarah clipped it to her vest. Now order your guards to open the front gate. Tell them an American operator is walking out and nobody shoots unless I shoot first. Nkomo gave the order. Sarah could hear the confusion in the responses. This wasn't how captures were supposed to work. 30 seconds, Sarah said, even though the countdown didn't exist. Everyone stay calm. She backed toward the door, laptop under one arm, reached the exit, paused. Colonel Chen, she said, tell your superiors that America's female operators aren't a weakness. We're the ones you should fear most, because we're smart enough to turn your traps against you. She walked out the door before anyone could respond. The compound was chaos. Guards were shouting, confused about what was happening. The front gate was open as ordered. Sarah walked through it, expecting a bullet in her back at any moment. Nothing. She made it outside the wall. Her tactical watch vibrated. Webb, what the hell is happening? Sarah activated her throat mic. Exfil now. I have the package. Move to extraction point Alpha. She started running. Her knees screamed protest. Her lungs burned. But she'd done the impossible, walked into a trap, and walked back out with exactly what she came for. Behind her, she heard shouting. Nkomo had realized the bluff. Guards were mobilizing. Sarah ran harder. Webb emerged from the tree line ahead, Morrison and Ortiz flanking him. Their faces showed absolute shock. Commander, what? Questions later. Run now. They ran. Sarah fell into formation, her body reminding her of every year she'd been doing this. The younger operators had to slow their pace to keep her with them. Sarah hated it, but accepted it. Gunfire erupted behind them. Rounds cut through vegetation. The guards were pursuing, angry and embarrassed. Contact rear, Morrison shouted, returning fire. Keep moving, Sarah ordered. Don't engage unless necessary. They crashed through the jungle. Sarah's GPS showed the extraction point 2 miles ahead. They had maybe 10 minutes before the helicopter arrived. If they could survive that long. More gunfire. Closer now. The guards were gaining. Ortiz stumbled, caught himself, kept moving. Webb was providing suppressing fire, slowing the pursuit but not stopping it. Sarah made a tactical decision she'd been avoiding. Webb Morrison set up defensive position at that tree line. Ortiz, you're with me. We get to the extraction point, secure the landing zone. Commander, we don't split up. That's an order, Chief. Webb's jaw tightened, but he obeyed. He and Morrison peeled off, finding cover, preparing to hold off pursuers. Sarah and Ortiz continued toward the extraction point. Sarah's body was failing now. Her vision blurred. Her legs felt like concrete. Commander, you're slowing down, Ortiz said. I'm aware. Let me carry the laptop. No, if I go down, you keep moving. Get this to Holland. That's priority 1. They reached the clearing. The extraction helicopter was already visible, incoming fast and low. Behind them, gunfire intensified. Webb and Morrison were in heavy contact. Sarah grabbed the radio. Ghost lead to extraction, Bird. We need immediate pickup. LZ is hot. Roger, Ghost lead. 30 seconds. The helicopter came in hard, flaring at the last moment. The door gunner was already firing, laying down suppression. Ortiz started toward the helicopter. Sarah grabbed his arm. Get Webb and Morrison. I'll secure the laptop. Commander, go. Ortiz ran back toward the firefight. Sarah stumbled to the helicopter, handed the laptop to the crew chief. Package secure, she gasped. 3 operators still in contact. The door gunner continued firing. Sarah grabbed a spare rifle, moved to the tree line, added her fire to his. Webb appeared, dragging Morrison. Blood on Morrison's leg. Ortiz was behind them, firing controlled bursts. Move, 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 Sarah shouted. They reached the helicopter. Webb and Ortiz loaded Morrison. The door gunner was screaming something about fuel. Sarah did a quick count. Webb, Morrison, Ortiz. Everyone accounted for. She turned to board the helicopter and felt the impact. Something hit her in the lower back. Not hard, almost gentle, like someone had tapped her with a finger. Sarah looked down and saw blood spreading across her tactical vest. Commander! Webb's voice seemed to come from very far away. Sarah's legs stopped working. She fell forward. Hands grabbed her, pulled her into the helicopter. The world tilted as the aircraft lifted off. Sarah could see tracers following them up, hear the ping of rounds hitting armor. Then they were above it. Away. Safe. Sarah lay on the helicopter floor, Webb pressing gauze against her back, his mouth moving but no sound reaching her ears. She thought about Bowen, about his sneering face, about being ordered to take a punch. She thought about Raymond Sullivan Jr. dying in Somalia, telling her to survive. She thought about this morning. Was it only this morning, standing in that training circle, absorbing contempt and doubt and dismissal? And she thought about the laptop. Secure. Mission complete. Sarah smiled. Webb was shouting something at her. She focused, read his lips. Stay with me. Sarah wanted to tell him that she was fine, that it was just a scratch, that she'd survived worse. Wanted to tell him about the pattern of rifle fire she'd identified in the pursuit, about the tactical mistakes Nkomo's guards had made, about a dozen small details that would help him on his next mission. But her mouth wouldn't work. Her vision was narrowing to a tunnel. Her body felt cold despite the African heat. Morrison appeared above her, his leg wound forgotten, pressing more gauze. Ortiz was on the radio coordinating with medical. Sarah's hand found Webb's wrist, gripped it weakly. Webb leaned close. Commander, stay awake. You're going to be fine. Medical is standing by. We're 20 minutes from the field hospital. 20 minutes. Sarah wasn't sure she had 20 minutes. Her tactical watch vibrated. A message from Admiral Holland, probably asking for status update. Sarah thought about what she'd tell him. Mission success. Intelligence recovered. Enemy neutralized. Team survived. All objectives achieved. She'd also tell him about the setup, about how someone in the chain of command had leaked her identity, about how this mission was designed to prove female operators were liabilities. She'd tell him that she'd turned their trap into her triumph, that she'd done the impossible, that she'd proven every doubt wrong. But first, she had to survive. Sarah focused on breathing, on staying conscious, on keeping her eyes open. She'd survived 18 combat deployments. survived ambushes that killed her entire team, survived 3 decades of people telling her she didn't belong. She could survive this. She had to survive this. Because the alternative meant Bowen was right, meant Chen was right, meant everyone who'd ever doubted her was vindicated. And Sarah McKenna would rather die than give them that satisfaction. The helicopter hit turbulence. Sarah's world went dark for a moment. When her vision returned, Webb's face was directly above hers. "Stay with me, Commander. That's an order." Sarah almost laughed. Since when did junior officers give her orders? But Webb's face was desperate, scared. This morning he'd been skeptical of her capabilities. Now he was terrified of losing her. Sarah found her voice. "Tell Sullivan." She coughed, tasted blood. "Tell him I kept the promise." "You can tell him yourself. You're not dying today." "Tell him." Sarah's vision blurred again. "Tell him Raymond would be proud." "Commander, no. Stay focused. Stay with us." But Sarah's mind was drifting. Back to Somalia. Back to that night 28 years ago when she'd crawled through enemy territory with a dead man on her back, refusing to leave him behind, refusing to quit. Raymond's voice in her memory. "Survive. Show them." Sarah had survived. She'd shown them. For 28 years, she'd proven that gender didn't determine capability. That age brought wisdom. That experience compensated for diminished physical strength. Was that enough? Had she done enough? The helicopter banked hard. Medical personnel were waiting at the field hospital. Sarah could see them through the open door, ready with gurneys and equipment. 10 more minutes. She could last 10 more minutes. Sarah's hand found the pocket where she'd placed Nkomo's radio. Still there, evidence of her bluff. Evidence that psychological warfare sometimes mattered more than firepower. Webb saw her movement. "Don't move, Commander. Save your strength." "Nkomo's radio," Sarah whispered. "Intelligence. Might want it." "We'll get it. Just focus on breathing." Breathing. Right. That seemed important. Sarah counted breaths, focused on the rhythm, in, out, in, out. The helicopter was descending, landing gear deploying, medical personnel rushing forward, hands lifting her, voices shouting medical jargon. Someone was cutting away her tactical vest. Sarah wanted to protest that vest had saved her life a dozen times, but her voice wasn't working anymore. An IV needle in her arm, oxygen mask over her face, the world becoming disjointed fragments. Morrison's face appearing above her, his lips moving. "Thank you." For what Sarah wondered, for getting him shot, for dragging him into an impossible mission. Then she understood. He was thanking her for proving his assumptions wrong, for showing him that capability wasn't about physical profile or gender, for teaching him something his ego hadn't wanted to learn. Sarah wanted to tell him, "You're welcome. You'll be a better operator now. You'll judge people by performance instead of prejudice." But the words wouldn't come. Ortiz next. His young face tight with guilt. "I should have seen the shooter, should have been covering that sector." Not your fault, Sarah thought. Casualties happen. That's combat. Then Webb, gripping her hand like he could physically keep her alive through willpower. "You did it," he said. "Mission complete. Everyone's safe. You did the impossible." Sarah wanted to smile, wanted to tell him that impossible was her specialty, that 30 years of being told she couldn't had taught her exactly how to do the things people said were impossible. Instead, her hand squeezed his weakly. Acknowledgement. Thanks. Goodbye, maybe. The ceiling lights of the medical facility were passing overhead now. Surgery doors opening. Doctors and nurses converging. Someone was saying her blood pressure was dropping. Someone else was calling for more plasma. Sarah's vision tunneled to a pinpoint. All sensation faded, except for Webb's hand still gripping hers. She thought about the training compound, about Bowen's face, about the moment when he'd ordered Torres to punch her teeth out. If she died now, that would be the last public moment of her career. Humiliation, contempt, doubt, no. Sarah fought against the darkness pulling at her, fought to stay conscious, fought to survive one more time, because Raymond Sullivan Jr. had told her to survive. And she'd been honoring that command for 28 years, And because dying now meant Bowen won, meant Chen won, meant everyone who'd ever doubted her was validated. And Sarah McKenna refused to give them that victory. The surgery doors closed. Webb's hand slipped from hers. Sarah went under, not knowing if she'd ever wake up. But in her last moment of consciousness, she thought, I completed the mission. I proved them wrong. I survived. If that's where my story ends, at least it ends with success. The darkness took her. But Commander Sarah McKenna, 52 years old, 30 years of service, sole survivor of impossible odds, the woman they said didn't belong, wasn't finished yet. Not by a long shot. Pain dragged Sarah back to consciousness. Not the sharp agony of the initial wound, but a deep grinding ache that radiated through her entire body. She tried to move and discovered restraints across her chest and legs. Panic flared before training kicked in. Medical restraints. Standard protocol for post-operative patients who might thrash and tear their sutures. Easy, Commander. A woman's voice, professional and calm. You're in recovery. You've been out for 16 hours. Don't try to move yet. Sarah's eyes focused slowly. White ceiling, medical equipment, the smell of antiseptic. A nurse was adjusting her IV. My team, Sarah croaked. Her throat felt like sandpaper. All alive. Petty Officer Morrison has a through-and-through leg wound, but he'll be fine. The others are uninjured. They've been waiting outside since you came out of surgery. Relief flooded through Sarah. Mission complete. Team intact. She'd done it. The laptop. Secure. Admiral Holland has it personally. He's been here twice checking on you. The nurse smiled. You're quite popular, Commander. Half the command has called asking about your status. Sarah doubted that. More likely they were calling to see if she died so they could start writing the narrative about how female operators were too vulnerable for field work. How bad? Sarah asked. The nurse's expression shifted. The bullet entered your lower back, missed your spine by less than an inch, fragmented against your pelvis. The surgeon removed most of the fragments, but some pieces are too close to major blood vessels to safely extract. You'll carry them for life. Can I walk? Eventually. Physical therapy will take months. Full recovery is estimated at 8 to 12 months. And Commander... The nurse hesitated. Your active duty status is in question. The medical board will evaluate whether you're fit for continued service. There it was. The end Sarah had been expecting. Not dramatic, not heroic. Just a medical evaluation that would quietly push her into retirement. I want to see my team, Sarah said. They've been waiting. I'll send them in. The nurse left. Sarah lay in the hospital bed, staring at the ceiling, processing what came next. The mission was complete, but her career was over. She'd proven she could still operate at the highest level, and it had cost her everything. The door opened. Webb entered first, his face drawn and tired. Morrison followed on crutches, his leg heavily bandaged. Ortiz brought up the rear, carrying what looked like a folder. Commander, Webb said. His voice was rough with emotion. We thought we'd lost you. Takes more than a bullet to kill me, Sarah said, forcing lightness into her tone. Morrison, you good? Clean through and through, ma'am. I'll be running again in 6 weeks. Morrison's expression was different than before. The skepticism was gone, replaced by something closer to respect. Commander, I need to say something. Go ahead. I was wrong about you. About female operators in general. I've spent the past 16 hours thinking about what happened in Mozambique. What you did walking into that compound alone, running a bluff with nothing but psychology and confidence getting us all out alive. That wasn't about physical strength or gender. That was pure tactical genius. And I missed it because I was too busy judging you by metrics that don't actually matter. Sarah felt something shift in her chest. Morrison, you followed orders. You did your job, that's all I asked. You asked us to trust you, Morrison said. And I didn't. Not really. Not until I watched you walk into an impossible situation and somehow make it work. That laptop you recovered, Admiral Holland, says it contains intelligence that would have compromised every female operator in special warfare. You didn't just complete the mission, you saved lives, careers, the future of an entire program. We all completed the mission, Sarah corrected. You three held off pursuers, provided covering fire, got everyone to extraction. That's what teams do. Ortiz stepped forward. Commander, there's something you need to know. About the mission briefing. About why it was volunteer only. Sarah's instincts prickled. What about it? Ortiz opened the folder. After you went into surgery, Admiral Holland debriefed us. He told us things that weren't in the original briefing. Things he thought you'd want kept quiet. Such as, the mission was compromised from the start, Ortiz said quietly. Someone in the chain of command leaked your identity to Nkomo, told him a female SEAL was coming, gave him time to prepare a trap specifically designed to capture you alive and use you as propaganda. Sarah's fingers tightened on the hospital sheets. Holland told you this. He thought we deserved to know what we'd walked into. What you'd known we were walking into. Webb's voice was hard. Webb's voice was, you knew it was a setup. You knew Nkomo was expecting you specifically, and you went anyway. The intelligence had to be recovered. The mission was time-sensitive. The mission was an assassination attempt disguised as an operation, Webb said. Someone wanted you dead or captured. Someone wanted to prove that female operators were liabilities, and you walked right into it knowing that. Sarah met his eyes. What was I supposed to do? Abort. Let that database get delivered to Chinese intelligence. Let every female operator in special warfare become a target. You were supposed to tell us. Webb's composure cracked. You were supposed to trust your team with the truth instead of running a solo infiltration into a compound full of hostiles who were specifically waiting for you. Would you have let me go if I'd told you? Webb opened his mouth, closed it. No, we would have found another way. There was no other way. The extraction window was closing. Nkomo was about to complete the transfer. I made a tactical decision. You made a suicide decision. Webb's voice rose. You walked into that compound expecting to die. That wasn't tactics, Commander. That was martyrdom. The room fell silent. Sarah could hear medical equipment beeping, could feel her heart rate increasing. Maybe it was, Sarah said quietly. Maybe I was tired of fighting, tired of proving myself, tired of being judged by people like Bowen, who'll never see me as anything but a diversity quota. Maybe walking into that compound knowing I might not walk out felt easier than spending another 30 years fighting the same battles. Morrison's crutches clattered as he shifted position. Commander, but that's not what happened, Sarah continued. I didn't die. I didn't get captured. I completed the mission, recovered the intelligence, and got my team out alive. Whatever my motivations were, the result was success. That's what matters. The result, Ortiz said, is that you're in a hospital bed with bullet fragments in your pelvis and your career is probably over. Meanwhile, the person who set you up is still out there, still in the chain of command, still in position to do this to someone else. Sarah's blood went cold. What are you saying? Ortiz pulled documents from the folder. After Holland debriefed us, I started digging. Called in favors with intelligence analysts I know. The leak to Nkomo wasn't random. Someone with access to classified operational planning gave him your identity, your typical tactics, and the probable timing of the mission. And I found out who. He laid a document on Sarah's hospital bed. She picked it up with trembling hands. The name at the top made her stomach drop. Lieutenant Commander Derek Bowen. No, Sarah whispered. That's not possible. It's possible, Ortiz said. Bowen has connections to defense contractors who work with African governments. He made 3 encrypted calls to a number that traces back to an intermediary who's known to work for Nkomo. The timing matches perfectly right after you accepted the Mozambique assignment. Sarah's mind raced. Bowen had humiliated her at the training compound, then sent her into a trap designed to prove she was incompetent. If she died, he would have been vindicated. If she'd been captured, the propaganda would have destroyed the credibility of female operators for a generation. Does Holland know? Sarah asked. He knows, Webb said. He's been gathering evidence for the past 12 hours, but there's a problem. Bowen's connected. He's got sponsors at the Pentagon, flag officers who see him as the future of naval special warfare. Holland can't move against him without rock-solid proof that will survive political pushback. The calls aren't enough. The calls are circumstantial. Bowen's lawyers would argue he was conducting legitimate liaison work. We need something definitive, something that proves intent. Sarah lay back against her pillow. Pain was making it hard to think clearly. Where's Bowen now? Still at Coronado. Holland put him on administrative duties pending investigation, but that's all he could do without tipping his hand. So Bowen's still free, still in uniform, still in position to sabotage other operations. Sarah felt rage building beneath the pain medication. And I'm in a hospital bed, unable to do anything about it. You've done enough, Webb said gently. You completed an impossible mission. You recovered critical intelligence. You survived a setup designed to kill you. Now let Holland handle Bowen. Holland's been handling things through official channels for 30 years, Sarah said. How's that working out? How many more female operators have to prove themselves before the system stops treating us as experiments? How many more traps do we have to survive? The door opened. Master Chief Sullivan entered, his weathered face grave. He took one look at the assembled team and the documents on Sarah's bed. You told her, Sullivan said. She deserved to know, Ortiz replied. Sullivan moved to Sarah's bedside. How are you feeling? Like I got shot. Master Chief, how's it look like I'm feeling? Fair point. Sullivan pulled up a chair. I need to tell you something. About your brother. About Raymond. Sarah's breath caught. Sullivan never talked about his brother. Never. The operation that killed Raymond wasn't random either, Sullivan said quietly. I've spent 28 years believing it was bad intelligence, bad luck. But after what happened to you in Mozambique, I started pulling files, digging through classified archives, and I found something. He handed Sarah another document. The Somalia operation was compromised. Someone in the command structure leaked the team's position to hostile forces. The ambush that killed 7 operators and left you as the sole survivor, that was deliberate. That was someone trying to prove that integrated special operations teams were too risky. Sarah felt the world tilt. You're saying Raymond was murdered by someone in our own military? I'm saying the person who leaked that operation was never identified. The investigation was shut down, filed away, classified. Sullivan's voice was hard as iron. And now, 28 years later, someone tried the exact same thing with you, which means either we have a new traitor with the same agenda, or the original traitor is still active. Bowen's only 38, Webb said. He would have been 10 years old in 1997. Bowen's not the mastermind, Sullivan said. He's a tool. Someone's using him. Someone with enough rank and influence to access classified operational planning. Someone who's been trying to sabotage female integration for decades. Sarah's mind was reeling. Who? I don't know yet, but Holland and I are working on it. And Sarah, Sullivan's expression softened. I need you to understand something. Raymond's death wasn't your fault. You survived because you're exceptional, not because you failed him. And whoever set up that ambush, whoever's been trying to destroy your career, they're scared of you. Scared of what you represent. That's why they keep trying to eliminate you. Sarah felt tears burning behind her eyes and forced them back. Master Chief, I'm done. My career is over. The medical board will retire me. Whoever's behind this won. They didn't kill me, but they ended me. Same result. Is it? Sullivan asked. Because from where I'm sitting, you just completed an impossible mission, recovered critical intelligence, and survived an assassination attempt. You're a hero, Sarah. The brass is talking about awarding you another Bronze Star. The story of what you did in Mozambique is spreading through the special operations community. You're becoming a legend. Legends don't matter if the system still views us as liabilities. Then change the system. Sullivan leaned forward. You've spent 30 years proving yourself in the field. Maybe it's time to prove yourself in a different arena. Command, training, policy. There are ways to fight this battle that don't require you to be operational. You're telling me to retire gracefully and become an administrator. I'm telling you to survive, again, the way Raymond asked you to. the way you've been doing for 3 decades. Sullivan's voice dropped. But this time survive by changing the structure instead of proving you can work within it. Before Sarah could respond, Admiral Holland entered the room. His face was drawn, exhausted. He looked like he'd aged 5 years in the past 24 hours. "Commander McKenna," Holland said. "How are you feeling?" "Like I need answers, Admiral." Holland glanced at the documents on her bed. "I see you've been briefed." "Good. Saves time. Sarah, I need you to understand something. What happened in Mozambique? What Bowen did, it's bigger than one compromised operation. We're uncovering a pattern of sabotage that goes back decades. Operations that failed suspiciously. Intelligence that was leaked at critical moments. Female operators who were put in impossible situations and then blamed when they couldn't succeed." "So fix it," Sarah said. "Court-martial Bowen. Investigate everyone connected to him. Clean house." "I wish it were that simple." Holland sat heavily in a chair. "Bowen's connected to a network of officers who believe that women in combat roles weaken the military. They're not monsters. Most of them genuinely believe they're protecting the effectiveness of our forces, and they're politically untouchable without evidence that can't be disputed." "What about the laptop, the intelligence I recovered?" "The laptop is gold. It proves Nkomo was specifically targeting female operators. It shows the Chinese intelligence interest in exploiting gender integration as a vulnerability. It's everything we need to justify enhanced security protocols." Holland paused. "But it doesn't prove Bowen's involvement. The connection between Bowen and Nkomo is circumstantial. We need more." "Like what?" "Like Bowen confessing, like documented communication showing intent, like something that will survive legal scrutiny and political pressure." Holland looked at Sarah intently. "Which is why I need you to do one more thing." Sarah's instincts screamed warning. "What thing?" "Talk to Bowen, face to face. Confront him with what you know. We'll be recording everything. If he admits to anything, if he lets slip any detail that proves his involvement, we can move against him. You want me to wear a wire and trick a confession out of him. I want you to have a conversation, as one officer to another. A conversation about what happened in Mozambique, about the training compound incident, about his views on women in special operations." Holland's expression was pleading. "Sarah, I know I'm asking a lot. I know you've already done more than anyone had a right to ask. But this is the only way to protect other female operators from the same setup. This is the only way to stop this." Sarah looked around the room, at Webb Morrison and Ortiz, who'd followed her into hell and come back changed. At Sullivan, who'd spent 28 years grieving his brother and seeking answers. At Holland, who was trying to hold together a system that kept trying to tear itself apart. "If I do this," Sarah said slowly, "and if Bowen confesses what happens to him, court-martial, dishonorable discharge at minimum, possibly prison time depending on what charges we can prove. And if he doesn't confess, if he's smart enough to keep his mouth shut, then we have nothing. He continues his career. He probably makes captain eventually. And the next female operator who threatens his worldview gets the same treatment you did." Sarah closed her eyes. Every part of her body hurt. She was 52 years old with bullet fragments in her pelvis and a career that was effectively over. She'd proven everything that needed proving. She'd survived everything that needed surviving. She'd earned the right to walk away. But Raymond Sullivan Jr.'s voice echoed in her memory. "Survive. Show them." Sarah opened her eyes. When Holland let out a breath he'd been holding. "Tomorrow, as soon as you're cleared to leave the hospital, we'll set it up in a conference room at the command. Officially, it's a debriefing about the Mozambique operation. Unofficially, it's your chance to get justice." Admiral Webb said, "Commander McKenna just got out of surgery. She can barely move. You can't ask her to—" "He's not asking," Sarah interrupted. "And I'm saying yes. Because if I don't do this, someone else ends up in this hospital bed. Or worse. And I'll be damned if I survived 30 years of this profession just to let it keep destroying the people who come after me." Sullivan nodded slowly. "That's the Sarah McKenna I know." But I have conditions, Sarah said to Holland. I want my team there. Webb, Morrison, Ortiz. I want them in the observation room listening to everything. If Bowen tries anything, if this goes wrong, I want people I trust as witnesses. Done. And I want Sullivan there too, in the room with me and Bowen. Bowen respects rank and legacy. If Sullivan's there, he might let his guard down, might say something he wouldn't say to me alone. Also done. Holland stood. Sarah, I know this is asking everything of you, but you're the only one who can do this. You're the only one Bowen targeted directly. You're the only one who can make him believe this is just a conversation between operators. It's not just a conversation, Sarah said. It's a trap. The same kind of trap he set for me in Mozambique. Seems fitting. Holland almost smiled. Poetic justice. Justice is all I'm after, Admiral. Bowen took 30 years of my service and tried to turn it into evidence of failure. Tried to make my survival look like incompetence. Tried to use me as proof that women don't belong in uniform. Sarah's voice hardened. Tomorrow I'm going to make him admit what he did. And then I'm going to watch his career end the way he tried to end mine. Not with glory, not with honor, just with the quiet, brutal reality of consequences. The room was silent. Then Morrison spoke up. Commander, we'll be there. Whatever you need, we've got your back. Same, Ortiz said. Webb nodded. You walked into hell for us. We'll walk into a conference room for you. Easiest mission ever. Sarah felt gratitude swell in her chest. These three men who'd started the mission skeptical of her capabilities were now volunteering to support her in what might be the hardest fight of her career. Thank you, she said simply. Holland moved toward the door. Get some rest, Commander. Tomorrow's going to be difficult, but it's also going to be righteous. And after 30 years of fighting, you've earned some righteousness. He left. The team lingered for a few more minutes, making awkward small talk, clearly not wanting to leave her alone. Finally, Sullivan ushered them out with promises that he'd stay as long as Sarah needed. When they were alone, Sullivan pulled his chair closer to Sarah's bed. You don't have to do this, he said quietly. Holland needs it. The system needs it. But you don't owe anyone anything more. I owe Raymond, Sarah said. I owe everyone who died proving that women could serve. I owe the operators who come after me. And I owe myself. Because if I walk away now, Bowen wins. Not legally. Not officially, but psychologically. He gets to keep believing he was right about me. And proving him wrong matters. More than you know. Sarah looked at Sullivan. Master Chief, I've spent 30 years being doubted, being tested, being forced to prove over and over that I deserve to wear this uniform. And I've never complained, never protested, just kept my head down and did the work. But what Bowen did, this crossed a line. He didn't just doubt me, he tried to kill me, and if I don't stop him, he'll try to kill someone else. Sullivan was quiet for a long moment. Raymond would be proud of you. Raymond would tell me I'm being stubborn and reckless. Same thing. Sullivan stood. Get some rest. Tomorrow we end this. Together. He left. Sarah lay alone in the hospital room, listening to the beeping of medical equipment, feeling pain radiate through her body, thinking about the confrontation ahead. Derek Bowen thought he'd won. Thought he'd proven his point. Thought that putting her in a hospital bed was the same as ending her career. He had no idea that Sarah McKenna's most dangerous weapon wasn't her combat skills or her tactical genius. It was her absolute refusal to quit until the mission was complete. And this mission, exposing the rot in the system, protecting future operators, getting justice for Raymond and everyone else who'd died, proving women belonged, this mission was just beginning. Sarah closed her eyes and started preparing. Running through scenarios, anticipating Bowen's responses, planning how to make him reveal himself. Tomorrow she'd face her enemy, not in a jungle in Mozambique, not in a training compound in California, but in a conference room where words were weapons and truth was the ammunition. Tomorrow, Lieutenant Commander Derek Bowen would learn what Sarah had known for 30 years. That underestimating her was the biggest mistake he'd ever make. and it would be his last. The conference room was smaller than Sarah expected. She'd imagined this confrontation happening in some grand space, but Admiral Holland had chosen intimacy over theater. Just a table, 6 chairs, and recording equipment hidden in the ceiling fixtures that Bowen wouldn't know existed. Sarah sat with her back to the wall, even though it meant using a wheelchair to position herself there. The bullet wound made sitting upright agony, but she'd refused pain medication that morning. She needed her mind sharp. Sullivan sat beside her, his presence both support and strategy. In the observation room next door, Webb, Morrison, and Ortiz were watching through one-way glass. Holland was there too, monitoring the recording equipment, ready to intervene if necessary. The door opened. Lieutenant Commander Derek Bowen entered, wearing his service khakis, every ribbon perfectly aligned. His posture radiating the confidence of someone who believed he'd already won. He stopped when he saw Sarah in the wheelchair. "Commander McKenna," Bowen said, surprise flickering across his face before he masked it. "I heard you were injured in Mozambique. I didn't realize it was this serious." "Bullet to the pelvis tends to complicate mobility," Sarah said. "Have a seat, Lieutenant Commander." Bowen glanced at Sullivan, clearly uncomfortable with the Master Chief's presence. "Admiral Holland said this was a mission debriefing. I wasn't aware Master Chief Sullivan was involved in the Mozambique operation." "He wasn't," Sarah said. "But he's involved in the conversation we're about to have. Sit down." Bowen sat, but tension radiated from him. "Commander, if this is about what happened at the training compound, I want to apologize. My methods were aggressive, but they were intended to maintain operational standards. Nothing personal." "Nothing personal?" Sarah repeated. "You ordered someone to punch my teeth out in front of 300 witnesses. You humiliated me deliberately. You accessed my confidential medical records and broadcast my injuries to undermine my credibility. But sure, nothing personal." Bowen's jaw tightened. "I was evaluating your fitness for duty. That's within my authority as what?" Sarah interrupted. "As a lieutenant commander with 8 years in service. I've got boots older than your career, Bowen. So let's skip the posturing and talk about what really happened." "I don't know what you mean." "Mozambique. The mission to capture Victor Nkomo. The mission that was compromised before my team even left the ground." Sarah leaned forward despite the pain it caused. "Someone told Nkomo I was coming. Someone gave him my identity, my tactics, my psychological profile. Someone set me up to be captured or killed so they could prove that female operators are liabilities." Bowen's expression remained neutral, but Sarah saw his fingers tighten on the table edge. "That's a serious allegation, Commander. Do you have evidence?" "I have 3 encrypted phone calls from your personal device to a number that connects to one of Nkomo's intermediaries. I have timestamps that match exactly with when I accepted the Mozambique assignment. And I have a very simple question. Why would a lieutenant commander with no operational involvement in an East Africa mission be making calls to people connected to the target of that mission? I maintain contacts throughout the region as part of my liaison duties. Those calls were routine intelligence sharing. At 2 a.m, 3 times in one night." Sarah smiled coldly. "Try again." Bowen looked at Sullivan. "Master Chief, with respect, I think Commander McKenna's injuries may be affecting her judgment. These accusations are bordering on paranoid." Sullivan spoke for the first time. "I've known Commander McKenna for 30 years. Her judgment is sound. Answer the question, Lieutenant Commander. Why were you calling Nkomo's people?" "I wasn't calling Nkomo's people. I was calling a regional security contact who happens to operate in the same area. It's not my fault if that contact has questionable associations." "Questionable associations," Sarah said. "Is that what we're calling arms dealers and Chinese intelligence assets now?" Bowen stood abruptly. "I don't have to sit here and defend my professional conduct to someone who just compromised a mission through reckless behavior. Commander, you walked into an enemy compound alone. You endangered your team. You got yourself shot. And now you're trying to blame me for your tactical failures." "Sit down," Sullivan said quietly. The command in his voice was absolute. Bowen sat. "Here's what I think happened," Sarah said. "I think you genuinely believe women don't belong in special operations. I think you saw me as a symbol of everything wrong with modern military policy. And I think when you humiliated me at the training compound and I still accepted the Mozambique mission, you panicked. Because if I succeeded, I'd prove you wrong in front of everyone. That's speculation. So you made a call, Sarah continued, to someone you thought could help ensure I failed. Maybe you didn't intend for me to die. Maybe you just wanted me captured. Wanted footage of a female SEAL begging for her life to use as propaganda. Wanted proof that physical limitations make women unsuitable for combat. You're delusional. But you miscalculated, Sarah said, because I didn't fail. I completed the mission, recovered the intelligence, got my team out alive, and now you're sitting across from me trying to figure out how to salvage this. Bowen's face had gone pale. Even if any of this were true, which it's not, you have no proof. Phone records don't prove intent, and without intent you have nothing. You're right, Sarah admitted. Legal proof is difficult, which is why I'm not interested in a legal solution. Bowen blinked. What? I'm offering you a choice, Sarah said. Option 1, resign your commission today, quietly, take an administrative separation. Walk away from the Navy and we never speak of this again. Your reputation stays intact. Your future outside the military remains open. You just don't get to keep trying to sabotage female operators. And option 2 is I make this very public. I tell every reporter who will listen about your phone calls, your connections to Nkomo, your deliberate attempt to compromise a classified operation. I can't prove it legally, but I can prove it in the court of public opinion. And your career will be destroyed even if you're never court-martialed. Bowen laughed, but it sounded forced. You're bluffing. You'd never go public with classified operational details. Try me, Sarah said. I've got nothing to lose. My career is over. This injury ends my operational status. So what do I care if I burn some bridges on my way out? At least I'll take you with me. Sullivan shifted in his seat. She's not bluffing, son. I've seen her burn bigger bridges than you. Bowen looked between them, clearly trying to calculate odds. This is blackmail. This is justice, Sarah corrected. Legal justice would take years and might fail. This way is faster and guaranteed. So what's it going to be? Quiet resignation or public scandal? Neither, Bowen said. Because you're wrong about everything. I didn't compromise your mission. I didn't contact Nkomo. And I won't be extorted by a washed-up operator who can't accept that her time is over. Sarah had expected this. Bowen was too arrogant to fold easily. She needed to push harder. Tell me about Captain Richard Thornton, Sarah said. Bowen froze. Who? Captain Thornton. Pentagon liaison to African regional commands from 1995 to 2005. Your mentor during your early career. The man who wrote your recommendation letters for every promotion. Sarah paused. The man who was quietly forced into retirement 10 years ago after allegations of leaking classified information to foreign contractors. Bowen's face went white. That has nothing to do with... Thornton hated integrated units, spent his entire career fighting women in combat roles, and you learned everything you know about military policy from him. Sarah leaned forward. I did some research last night. Turns out Thornton still has contacts in Africa, still maintains relationships with people like Nkomo, and you still call him regularly, including the night before I left for Mozambique. You can't prove any of this. I don't have to prove it. I just have to ask the questions publicly. Let investigators follow the trail. Let your connection to a disgraced officer who leaked intelligence become part of your permanent record. Sarah's voice hardened. You want to talk about careers being destroyed? Let's talk about yours. Bowen stood again, his hands shaking. You think you're so righteous. You think you've proven something. But all you've proven is that women in combat roles cause problems. Look at you, shot, crippled, sitting here making threats because you can't accept that maybe I was right. Maybe you don't belong here. Then say it, Sarah said quietly. Say you were right. Say I don't belong. Say women in general don't belong. Say what you really believe. Fine, Bowen snapped. You want the truth. Yes, I believe women in special operations are a mistake. I believe physical standards matter. I believe that pretending gender doesn't affect combat performance is politically correct nonsense that gets people killed. I believe you've spent 30 years being given accommodations and benefits and promotions you didn't fully earn because the brass wanted to prove a political point. And I believe that your presence in uniform makes every real operator less effective because we have to compensate for your weaknesses. Sullivan started to stand, but Sarah raised a hand, stopping him. Keep going, Sarah said to Bowen. Get it all out. You walked into that compound in Mozambique and you got lucky, Bowen continued, his voice rising. That's all it was. Luck. And the fact that everyone's treating you like a hero instead of recognizing that you endangered your entire team with a reckless solo infiltration, that proves my point. We've lowered our standards so much that survival equals success. Well, I'm not lowering my standards. I won't pretend that age and gender don't matter in combat. I won't participate in this social experiment that's weakening the most elite fighting force in the world. Are you finished? Sarah asked. No, Bowen said. One more thing. That training compound incident, I don't regret it. You needed to understand what real operators face. You needed to be tested under conditions that approximate actual combat stress. And if that embarrassed you, if that hurt your feelings, then maybe you're not cut out for this profession. Because real combat doesn't care about your feelings, Commander. Real combat doesn't give you accommodations. Sarah nodded slowly. Thank you for being honest. Yeah, well, honesty is something you'd know nothing about, Bowen said bitterly. You've built your entire career on a lie. The lie that you're just as capable as male operators. The lie that gender doesn't matter. And now you're trying to destroy my career because I had the courage to tell the truth. The truth, Sarah repeated. She looked at Sullivan. Master Chief, would you mind asking Admiral Holland to join us? Sullivan stood and left the room. Bowen watched him go, confusion crossing his face. What's happening? Bowen asked. What's happening, Sarah said, is that for the past 20 minutes, you've been confessing to beliefs that violate Navy regulations on equal opportunity, discrimination, and professional conduct. You've admitted to creating a hostile work environment. You've admitted to deliberately humiliating a senior officer based on her gender. And you've done it all on recording equipment that's been documenting every word. Bowen's face went from pale to gray. You recorded this. Every word, video and audio. Sarah's voice was cold now. You were right about one thing. I can't prove you called in Como. Can't prove you compromised the mission. But I can prove you're a discriminatory officer who abused his authority to target female operators. That's grounds for court-martial all by itself. The door opened. Admiral Holland entered, followed by Sullivan. Holland's expression was grim. Lieutenant Commander Bowen, Holland said. Stand up. Bowen stood swaying slightly. I've reviewed the recording of this conversation, Holland said. Based on your admitted conduct and expressed beliefs, I'm recommending immediate removal from command, pending a full investigation. You'll be restricted to base until the JAG office determines appropriate charges. Your security clearance is suspended effective immediately. Do you understand? Bowen looked at Sarah. You set me up. I gave you a choice, Sarah corrected. You could have resigned quietly. Instead, you chose to prove exactly what kind of officer you are. That's on you, not me. This isn't over, Bowen said. I have connections, supporters. You think one recording destroys me? I'll fight this. I'll appeal. You'll lose. Holland interrupted. Because this isn't just about you anymore. Master Chief Sullivan has identified connections between you and Captain Thornton. We're investigating whether Thornton's intelligence leaks extended to your operations. If we find evidence linking you to the Mozambique compromise, you won't just lose your commission. You'll face prison time for treason. Bowen's legs seemed to give out. He sat heavily in his chair. I didn't mean for her to die, he whispered. I just wanted her to fail. Wanted her to be captured so everyone could see that women in combat are a vulnerability. I didn't think Nkomo would actually hurt her. I thought he'd just hold her for propaganda purposes and then negotiate a release. The room went silent. Sarah felt ice in her veins. He'd actually said it. Actually admitted to compromising the mission. Holland's face was stone. Lieutenant Commander Derek Bowen, you are under arrest for unauthorized disclosure of classified information and conspiracy to endanger American personnel. You have the right to remain silent. 2 military police officers entered and took Bowen by the arms. He didn't resist, just stared at Sarah with an expression of betrayal. You destroyed my career, he said. No, Sarah replied. You destroyed your own career the moment you decided that your prejudices mattered more than the lives of your fellow operators. I just made sure there were consequences. They led Bowen away. The door closed behind them. Sarah sat in her wheelchair, suddenly exhausted. The adrenaline that had sustained her through the confrontation was fading, leaving only pain and a strange emptiness. You did it, Holland said quietly. You got him to confess. I gave him enough rope to hang himself, Sarah corrected. He did the rest. Sullivan moved to her wheelchair. How are you holding up? Hurting, tired, wondering if this was worth it. It was worth it, Holland said. Sarah, what you just did, exposing Bowen, protecting future operators, getting justice for everyone he's targeted, that matters more than any single mission. You've changed the trajectory of this command. Have I? Sarah looked up at him. Or have I just identified one symptom of a larger disease? Bowen had supporters, officers who agreed with him. This doesn't end with his arrest. No, Holland admitted. It doesn't. But it's a start. And it's a message to everyone in the chain of command that discrimination and sabotage will have consequences. The door opened again. Webb, Morrison, and Ortiz entered, their faces showing a mixture of shock and satisfaction. Commander Webb said, "That was the most brutal takedown I've ever witnessed. You just destroyed that man with nothing but questions and patience." He destroyed himself, Sarah said. I just asked the right questions. Morrison moved closer. Ma'am, for what it's worth, watching you operate these past 48 hours in Mozambique, and now here you've taught me more about what it means to be an operator than my entire career up to this point. It's not about being the strongest or the fastest. It's about being the smartest and the most committed. And you're both. Sarah felt unexpected emotion welling up. Thank you, Petty Officer. Ortiz spoke up. What happens now? With you, I mean. The medical board, your career. Honestly, I don't know, Sarah said. The injury is serious. I might not be cleared for operational duty again, but I'm starting to think that might be okay. That there are other ways to serve, other battles to fight. Like command, Holland suggested. Like training, like policy development. Sarah, I want you to consider taking a position at the Naval Special Warfare Development Group. We need experienced operators who understand both the tactical and the political aspects of this profession, who can train the next generation not just in combat skills, but in how to navigate a system that's still figuring out what equality actually means. Sarah considered it. That would mean giving up operational status. It would mean accepting that your value extends beyond fieldwork, Holland corrected. That 30 years of experience is too valuable to waste, that you have knowledge and skills that need to be passed on. Sarah thought about Raymond Sullivan Jr., about his last words. Survive. Show them. She'd survived. For 30 years, she'd survived and proven herself and fought battles nobody should have had to fight. Maybe it was time to help others survive too. I'll think about it, Sarah said. But first I need to recover, need to heal, need to figure out who I am when I'm not constantly proving myself. Sullivan squeezed her shoulder. Raymond would be proud, not just of the missions you completed, but of the person you've become, the legacy you're building. Sarah felt tears finally break through her defenses. I miss him every day. I know, but he's not really gone. He lives in everything you do, every operator you mentor, every barrier you break, every time you refuse to quit when quitting would be easier. Sullivan's voice was thick with emotion. My brother saved your life, and you've spent 3 decades making sure his sacrifice mattered. That's more than survival. That's purpose. Webb cleared his throat. Commander, the team wanted you to know something. We've been talking, the 3 of us, and we want to request assignment to whatever command you end up in. We want to keep working with you, learning from you. Morrison nodded. You changed how I think about capability, about what makes someone valuable as an operator. I don't want to lose that." "Same," Ortiz said. "You're the best tactical mind I've ever worked with, and I'm not ready to stop learning." Sarah looked at them, these three men who'd started the mission skeptical and were ending it as believers. "You guys know I'm going to be insufferable as an instructor, right? Way harder on you than I was in Mozambique." "We're counting on it," Webb said with a smile. Holland moved toward the door. "I'll let you all decompress. Sarah, take the time you need to heal. When you're ready, we'll talk about what comes next. But know this, you've earned the right to choose your own path now. Whatever you decide, you'll have my full support." He left. Sullivan followed, leaving Sarah alone with her team. "So," Morrison said, "what now? Now?" Sarah looked down at her wheelchair at the bandages visible beneath her uniform. "Now I do what I've always done. I keep going. I heal. I adapt. I survive." "And then?" Webb asked. "And then I figure out how to make sure other operators don't have to fight the same battles I did. How to make sure the doors I kicked open stay open. How to make sure that 30 years from now, some female SEAL candidate doesn't have to prove herself to people like Bowen, because the system has finally evolved past needing proof." She looked up at them. "I've spent my entire career being the exception, the outlier, the statistical anomaly that people point to when they want to argue about standards and capabilities. I'm tired of being the exception. I want to be the beginning of something normal, something expected." "That's a hell of a mission, Commander," Ortiz said. "Yeah," Sarah agreed. "It is. Good thing I've got experience with impossible missions." Webb helped her wheelchair toward the door. As they left the conference room, Sarah took one last look at the space where she'd just ended Derek Bowen's career. Not with violence, not with physical dominance, but with the same weapon she'd been using for 30 years, intelligence, patience, and the absolute refusal to be underestimated. They moved through the corridors of Naval Special Warfare Command. People stopped, stared, whispered. Word had already spread about what had happened in that conference room, about Bowen's confession, about Sarah's tactical brilliance. In the distance, Sarah could see the training compound where Bowen had ordered someone to punch her teeth out. That felt like years ago now, not days. She wondered what the young operators training there would remember about this moment, would remember about her, hoped they'd remember that strength came in forms beyond physical power, that survival sometimes meant outsmarting your enemies rather than overpowering them, that the hardest battles weren't always fought with weapons. They reached the medical wing. A nurse was waiting to take Sarah back to her recovery room. "I've got her from here," the nurse said to Webb. Webb hesitated. "Commander, before you go, thank you for showing us what real leadership looks like, for teaching us that the best operators aren't the ones who never doubt themselves. They're the ones who doubt themselves constantly, but keep moving forward anyway." Sarah smiled. "That's the most honest thing anyone said to me in years, Chief." "It's true, though. You're constantly questioning whether you're good enough, whether you belong, whether you're still capable. And you use that doubt as fuel instead of letting it stop you. That's what makes you exceptional." "Or stubborn," Sarah said. "Same thing in this profession." The nurse wheeled Sarah toward her room. As they turned the corner, Sarah caught sight of herself in a window reflection. 52 years old. Gray hair, weathered face, body broken and healing. Career ending, but not finished. She looked like someone who'd fought a war, which she supposed she had, just not the war anyone expected. Back in her room alone with her thoughts, Sarah finally let herself process everything. Bowen was arrested. The mission was complete. The intelligence was secure. Her team had survived. Justice had been served. But more than that, something had shifted. Not just in Bowen's career, but in how people saw her, how her team saw her, how she saw herself. For 30 years, Sarah had been proving she belonged, proving she was capable, proving that gender didn't determine worth. Today, she'd finally stopped trying to prove anything. Had simply been herself, flawed, injured, imperfect, but undeniably effective. And somehow, that had been enough. Her tactical watch vibrated. A message from Admiral Holland. "Webb, Morrison, and Ortiz have formally requested assignment to the training command. I'm approving it. You'll have your team when you're ready. No pressure. Just know that the door is open. J.H. Sarah smiled, looked down at her broken body, thought about the long recovery ahead, the physical therapy, the medical evaluations, the uncertainty, then thought about the operators she could train, the knowledge she could pass on, the system she could help change from the inside. Raymond Sullivan Jr.'s voice echoed one last time. Survive. Show them. Sarah had survived, had shown them. But more than that, she'd won. Not by being stronger, not by being faster, not by conforming to someone else's definition of what a warrior should be, but by being exactly who she was, Commander Sarah McKenna, 52 years old, 30 years of service, sole survivor of impossible odds, teacher mentor, and living proof that capability had nothing to do with fitting a predetermined mold. The battles weren't over. There would be more Bowens, more challenges, more people who needed convincing. But Sarah McKenna had spent 3 decades convincing people, had survived ambushes, bureaucracy, prejudice, and literal assassination attempts. Whatever came next, she'd handle it the same way she'd handled everything else. One mission at a time, one day at a time, one impossibility at a time. Because that's what warriors did. Not the warriors in movies or recruiting posters, but the real ones. The ones who kept going when everything hurt and everyone doubted and the mission seemed impossible. The ones who survived not because they were invincible, but because they refused to accept any other option. Sarah closed her eyes and let herself rest, knowing that when she woke, the next chapter of her war would be waiting. And she'd face it exactly the way she'd faced everything else in her career, with courage, intelligence, and the absolute certainty that underestimating her was the last mistake anyone,